The call came late on a Thursday afternoon, just as I was finishing a meeting at my law firm. "Tiana, we need to talk about the art collection. Your sister sold it." Stephen, my lawyer, said. His voice was steady, but there was an edge to it that immediately sent a cold shiver down my spine. I froze, the weight of his words crashing down on me. Michelle, my older sister, the one who had always been the picture of responsibility, the one who had promised to handle our late father's estate, had sold the art collection I had inherited from him, the very collection that had taken years to assemble, each painting a part of our family's legacy, and she did it behind my back. "Sold it?" I repeated, my voice shaking. "How could she? How is that even possible?" Stephen hesitated for a moment before answering. "Because she forged your signature, Tiana. She convinced the auction house you approved of the sales, and they never questioned her claim." A knot formed in my stomach. My father's art collection wasn't just an inheritance, it was a piece of our family's soul, one I had always known would be my connection to him after his passing. And now my sister, the one person I thought I could trust, had not only betrayed me, but had violated my father's legacy. But Stephen wasn't done yet. "The good news? She made a critical mistake. You might just be able to take it all back." I hadn't realized it then, but that phone call would be the beginning of a legal battle that would tear apart everything I thought I knew about my sister and my family. After Stephen's call, I spent the next few days in a state of disbelief. How could Michelle, the sister who'd always been the reliable one, the one I turned to when I needed advice, betray me like this? And for what? Money? The more I thought about it, the more questions I had. I couldn't understand why she had done it, why she hadn't come to me, or why she thought she could get away with something like this. I took a seat at my desk, the clutter of papers from my father's estate scattered across it. I'd only just returned from the funeral, feeling a dull ache in my heart as I went through the motions of wrapping up his affairs. The art collection, my father's pride and joy, was the one thing he had left for us. I was certain it meant as much to Michelle as it did to me, even if she'd always played the role of the responsible one. But now, with the knowledge that she'd sold some of the pieces, I felt like I was drowning. I stared at the email Stephen had sent me, detailing the specifics of the art sales. It didn't make sense. The auction houses had offered their standard procedures for high-value artwork, and Michelle had convinced them that I had given the green light. But I hadn't. I hadn't even known about the sales. How could she have signed off on this without me? My mind raced as I clicked through the documents. Then, I saw it. The forged signature, my signature on the sale papers. It was subtle, but there was no mistaking it. The way she'd manipulated the letters, altering them just enough to mimic my hand, was chilling. I called Stephen immediately. "Tiana, I understand this is difficult," he said when I told him about the forgery. "But this is bigger than just selling a few paintings. She's been hiding a lot, and we need to start looking into everything: her finances, her actions. If she's been living beyond her means, she may have been doing this for a while." The idea of Michelle hiding things from me was hard to stomach, but Stephen's words didn't sound far-fetched. She had always seemed so together, the one who took care of everything: our parents' finances, their business dealings, our family's affairs. She was the one who looked after us, who made sure I didn't make the same mistakes she did when it came to responsibility. I always assumed she had a sense of honor, that she would never betray the family legacy. But this was something I never imagined. I decided I had no choice but to confront her. I called Michelle and asked to meet in person, my voice steady despite the storm swirling inside me. "I thought we could talk about Dad's estate," I said, keeping the words measured. "I've been looking through the records, and I noticed something strange. Can we meet?" She agreed without hesitation, though I could hear the unease in her voice. I was sure she hadn't expected me to figure it out so soon. When we met at a cafe later that afternoon, she seemed off. There was something in her posture, in the way she avoided eye contact, that sent a wave of suspicion over me. I sat across from her, my hands gripping my coffee cup so tightly my knuckles turned white. "What's going on, Michelle?" I asked, my voice calm but firm. "Why didn't you tell me about the art sales? I found the documents your signature forging mine. You sold some of Dad's paintings without my approval." Michelle's face went pale, and for a split second, I thought I saw guilt flash across her eyes. But it quickly disappeared, replaced by the deflection I was all too familiar with. "Tiana, I was just trying to take care of everything," she said, her voice shaky but defensive. You know how much Dad's art collection meant to him. I thought it would be easier this way. I didn't want you to get overwhelmed. Easier for who? I shot back. You didn't want me to get overwhelmed? You sold his paintings behind my back, Michelle. Why? What was so important that you had to go behind my back and do this? She shifted uncomfortably in her seat, tapping her fingers nervously on the table. I waited for her to speak, the tension between us thickening with each passing second. She finally looked at me, her eyes filled with an unreadable mixture of frustration and shame. I had no choice, she said quietly, almost as if she were speaking more to herself than to me. You wouldn't understand. Things have been tough for me, Tiana. I've been dealing with things you don't know about. The art, it was the only way I could get out of the mess I've been in. Her words hung in the air, and I could feel the ground beneath me shift. What mess are you talking about? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Michelle hesitated before answering. I've been struggling financially. I have debts, credit cards, loans, things I couldn't keep up with. And it just kept piling on. I didn't know how else to handle it, Tiana. I thought if I could just sell the paintings and make enough money, I could fix everything. Her confession hit me like a punch to the stomach. All the pieces I'd been missing started to fall into place. The nights she'd canceled plans with me at the last minute, her constant need to present herself as the perfect, put-together sister, the lavish gifts she'd been buying for herself, nothing had seemed out of the ordinary at the time. But now I understood. This wasn't about taking care of Dad's legacy. This was about Michelle trying to escape the crushing weight of her own financial ruin. Michelle, how could you think this was the solution? I asked, my voice breaking. I understand that you were struggling, but you didn't trust me enough to tell me the truth. You didn't even give me a chance to help you. She looked down, unable to meet my gaze. I was embarrassed. I didn't want to disappoint you, Tiana. I thought I could fix it on my own. I sat back in my chair, stunned. The person I had always looked up to, the sister who had seemed so strong and capable, was drowning in lies and poor decisions. My anger was tempered with a sense of disbelief. How could she think I would just stand by and watch her destroy everything our father had worked for? You should have trusted me, Michelle, I said softly. We're family. I could have helped. Her eyes filled with tears as she wiped them away quickly. I know, Tiana. I'm sorry. I made a huge mistake. But sorry wasn't enough. Not this time. As we sat there in silence, the weight of what had happened began to sink in. Michelle's apology wasn't going to undo the damage she'd caused, and I knew that I had a difficult decision ahead of me. The legal battle I had to face wasn't just about reclaiming the artwork, it was about protecting the legacy my father had left behind and holding my sister accountable for her betrayal. It was clear that our relationship had changed, maybe permanently, and now I had to figure out what I was willing to fight for, family or justice. The following days after Michelle's confession were a blur of anger, disbelief, and a painful realization that the sister I thought I knew had vanished behind a veil of lies. I couldn't shake the image of Michelle sitting across from me, apologizing with tears in her eyes, and yet offering nothing more than excuses for her actions. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that her desperation had clouded her judgment and led her to make a terrible mistake. But deep down, a gnawing suspicion began to take hold. If she could lie about selling the artwork, what else had she lied about? I needed answers, and as much as it pained me to do it, I had to dig deeper. Stephen and I set up another meeting, this time with one clear objective: uncover everything Michelle had been hiding. I didn't just need to know how she sold the paintings, what happened to them after they were sold, and why she thought it was all right to keep me out of the loop. But more pressing, I needed to understand how she had pulled this off without getting caught. There had to be more to the story. By the time I walked into Stephen's office, the weight of the investigation already felt heavy on my shoulders. His desk was cluttered with files, papers, and images of the art collection that had once been a symbol of family pride. Now, they were just evidence. Stephen didn't waste any time. He motioned for me to sit, his face grim. "Tiana, I think you need to brace yourself," he said, looking up from a stack of documents. "I've been digging into the legal documents Michelle filed with the auction houses and the notary. There's something you need to see." I didn't know whether I was prepared for what he was about to tell me, but the way Stephen's tone shifted from neutral to serious sent a chill down my spine. He slid a piece of paper toward me. It was a copy of the will, my father's will. "Take a look at this," he said. I took the paper from him, my eyes scanning the familiar handwriting. It was my father's. I had read this will myself when he passed away. He had clearly left the art collection to both Michelle and me, equally, as a shared inheritance. But as I read further, my stomach twisted. A sentence had been added in a different hand, a more formal style, and the text had been slightly altered. It read, "I leave the entirety of my art collection to my daughter, Michelle, as she is best suited to care for and maintain it." My heart raced as I reread the sentence. I felt sick. "I don't understand," I whispered, my voice trembling. This is wrong. This isn't how it was written. Dad would never have left everything to Michelle alone." Stephen nodded. "That's because it wasn't written by your father." I looked up at him, my mind struggling to grasp what he was saying. "What do you mean? This isn't Dad's handwriting?" "No, Tiana, it's not. Someone forged this portion of the will. We've traced it back. The alterations were made after your father's death. The realization hit me with the force of a freight train. Michelle hadn't just forged my signature on the sale documents. She had altered my father's will to make it appear as though the art collection was hers to do with, as she pleased. She had completely erased me from the inheritance, turning a shared legacy into a personal asset. I felt my breath catch in my chest. How deep did her deception run? How long had she been planning this? The pain of her betrayal felt like a physical blow. She hadn't just stolen from me, she had taken away my father's final wishes. And for what? To cover up her financial mess? Stephen saw my reaction and gave me a moment to absorb it all. "This is serious, Tiana. Michelle's actions have crossed into illegal territory. Forging a will is not something that can be swept under the rug. You have a legitimate claim to the collection, and we can fight for it in court. But," my mind was swirling with conflicting thoughts. I wasn't sure how to even begin. "But Stephen, it's my sister. This is Michelle. She's my family. I don't know if I can do this." Stephen's eyes softened, but his tone remained firm. "Tiana, I understand. This is going to be painful. It's not just about the money or the paintings. It's about your family. But what Michelle did isn't just a betrayal of you, it's a betrayal of your father's legacy. Your dad trusted you both to uphold his wishes. If you don't take action, she'll walk away with everything." I felt the weight of his words settle in my chest. I wanted to protect Michelle. I wanted to believe that somehow everything could be fixed with an apology. But deep down, I knew that the damage had been done. Michelle's betrayal went far beyond a mere mistake. She had deliberately manipulated the situation to suit her own needs, and now I was left to pick up the pieces. I closed my eyes, trying to hold back the tears that threatened to spill over. I could still hear my father's voice in my head, reminding me of how important it was to preserve the family's integrity and legacy. He would never have wanted this. I could almost see him shaking his head in disappointment, his art collection being sold off like mere property. "I don't know if I can do this, Stephen," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I can take her to court." Stephen leaned forward, his expression softening. "You don't have to make the decision alone. You're not fighting this battle by yourself. I'm here to help you every step of the way." I nodded slowly, taking in his words. The decision wasn't going to be easy. The pain of losing my sister, of tearing apart everything I thought we had as a family, felt unbearable. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that Michelle had already made the decision for me. She had chosen her own path, one filled with deceit and betrayal. And now, I had no choice but to follow through and fight for what was right. As I sat there in Stephen's office, the weight of what lay ahead began to sink in. This wasn't just about art or money. This was about standing up for my father's memory, for the trust he had placed in us, and for my own sense of integrity. I couldn't back down now. With a heavy heart, I looked up at Stephen and made my decision. "Let's do it," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "We'll fight her in court. We'll fight for what Dad left behind." And so, the battle began. After the shock of the forged will, I threw myself into the investigation with a determined focus I didn't even realize I had. I was no longer just fighting to reclaim the art collection my father had lovingly curated over the years. Now, it felt as if the stakes were much higher. My sister's betrayal was one thing, but as the days passed, I began to understand that Michelle's deceit wasn't the only thing that had been hidden from me. Something deeper, more significant, had been concealed beneath the surface of my father's estate. I spent hours in the small room where my father had kept all of his personal items, his journals, letters, photographs, and old, worn-out books. It was a place that once felt full of life and creativity, now just an empty reminder of the man who had inspired me to pursue a career in law. My father had always been supportive of my dreams. encouraging me to follow my passions, but I never realized just how much he believed in me until I started sifting through his personal belongings. It was in the farthest corner of the room, tucked away inside a dusty box of old papers, that I found it, a yellowed envelope with my name written on it in my father's familiar handwriting. My heart skipped a beat. I'd seen him write letters before, but never one addressed to me like this. I opened the envelope carefully, the paper crinkling as I unfolded it. Inside was a single letter, its words clear and direct, though the ink had started to fade over time. Asterisk, my dearest Tiana. If you're reading this, then it means I'm no longer here to see you take the next steps in your life. I've watched you grow into a woman who is not only smart and determined, but compassionate, and I am proud of everything you've become. However, I know you're also aware of the many sacrifices you've made in order to chase your dreams, and it hasn't always been easy. That's why I've decided to set aside a portion of my wealth, not just in the form of these paintings, but in a way that will give you the security to follow your heart and build the future you've always imagined. I've arranged for a sum of money to be transferred to you, one that will allow you to pursue your education, your law career, or whatever else you feel is right for you. It is my deepest hope that this gift will help you achieve everything you've set out to do. Don't let fear of failure or insecurity hold you back. You have the world at your feet, and I believe in you more than you could ever know. All my love, Dad. Asterisk. The words hit me harder than I could have imagined. My father hadn't just left me a piece of art, a legacy of his career, or a collection of memories. He had set aside money that was meant for me to follow my dreams without the weight of financial burdens hanging over my head, a sum large enough to secure my future, to finally give me the independence I had always wanted. I'd always known my father supported me, but this was something more. It was a powerful symbol of his belief in me, in my potential. But as I read the letter again, the weight of the situation settled in. My father had believed in me enough to give me the chance to build my future, but Michelle's actions threatened to strip me of that chance. She had taken the paintings, yes, but she had also unknowingly erased the very foundation my father had worked so hard to provide me. I stared at the letter, my hand trembling as I set it down on the desk. I had always assumed that the inheritance would be the paintings, the tangible legacy of my father's artistic achievements. But what my father had left me wasn't just an object, it was an opportunity. This was the inheritance he had truly wanted me to have. It wasn't about the art collection or the money itself, it was about what I could do with it. It was about the chance to build something lasting, something meaningful, without fear or hesitation. I couldn't let Michelle get away with this. Not just because of the art, but because of what I stood to lose. I wasn't just fighting for my father's legacy, or for the artworks I had every right to inherit. I was fighting for my future. My law career, the one my father had always encouraged me to pursue, was at stake. My dreams were tied up in what he had set aside for me, and I wasn't going to let it slip away without a fight. It was then that I realized how much my father's support had shaped my path. I had never truly understood how much he believed in me until now, until I saw the lengths he had gone to in order to ensure I could achieve my goals. My father had always been proud of me, but in that moment, I understood that the real inheritance he wanted me to have was my confidence in myself, the belief that I was capable of anything. The art collection was only a small piece of that legacy. The real gift was the financial freedom to build my career, my life. I sat back in my chair, the weight of my father's words settling over me. I couldn't allow Michelle to take everything he had worked for, everything he had planned for me. It wasn't just about the money, it was about the opportunity to honor my father's wishes, to continue the path he had so carefully laid out for me. I knew what I had to do. I had to fight not just for the paintings, but for the inheritance that meant so much more. And as I sat there in the quiet of my father's room, I felt a surge of determination. I would take action. I would protect what was mine, what my father had meant for me to have. The next step was clear. I had to make sure Michelle understood the gravity of what she had done. It wasn't just about art. It was about trust that she had broken. I stood up from the desk, tucking the letter carefully back into the envelope. The emotional turmoil of the past few weeks had taken its toll, but in this moment, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. My father's voice, his belief in me, had become my own driving force. This wasn't just about reclaiming what had been taken from me. It was about making sure my father's legacy lived on, that the future he had planned for me wasn't stolen by deceit and desperation. I walked out of the room, the letter safely tucked under my arm, ready to face whatever came next. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I was truly in control. The mediation room felt suffocating, the air thick with tension. The walls were lined with expensive paintings, pieces that were a reminder of what was being fought over. The art collection, which had once been a symbol of our family's legacy, now seemed like an insurmountable mountain of betrayal between me and Michelle. My heart pounded in my chest as I sat across from her. For years, I had looked up to Michelle. She was the one everyone turned to for guidance, the one who made the right decisions. She had always been the perfect sister, the responsible one, the one who seemed to have it all together. But now, sitting there, I was faced with a version of Michelle I didn't recognize. I could feel my palms sweating as I tried to steady my breath. Stephen, my lawyer, sat beside me, flipping through the thick stack of evidence we had gathered over the past few weeks. There were copies of the forged documents, including the will and the signatures Michelle had falsified. I glanced at the table, where Michelle sat, nervously shifting in her seat, her face pale and eyes darting around the room. She was no longer the poised, confident older sister I had once known. She was unraveling. "Let's begin," the mediator said, cutting through the silence. He was a neutral third party, someone hired to help resolve the dispute without going to court. I had hoped that this would bring some closure, that we could finally talk things through. But sitting there, I knew deep down that nothing would make this easy. Stephen cleared his throat and spoke first, his voice calm but firm. "Tiana is here today to reclaim what was rightfully left to her by their father. We've gathered all the documents, including the forged will and the false sale documents. The evidence is clear, Michelle." Michelle stiffened. She began, but then faltered, her voice shaking. I didn't know it would come to this. I didn't think it would be such a big deal. I could feel my anger rising as I leaned forward, unable to contain my frustration. "Michelle, how could you think this wouldn't be a big deal? You forged Dad's will. You sold the paintings behind my back. Everything he worked for, everything he set aside for, me gone. All because of your lies." Her face flushed with guilt, but she tried to maintain her composure. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I thought—" She stopped herself, biting her lip. "I thought if I could just fix things, if I could get some money, I could get myself out of the mess I was in. You don't understand how much pressure I've been under." My eyes narrowed. "And that justifies everything you did? You took what wasn't yours. You took away my future." Michelle's gaze dropped to the table, her fingers twisting together. She was no longer looking at me, and for the first time, I saw the cracks in the mask she had carefully crafted over the years. Michelle, the perfect sister, was unraveling right before me. "I was struggling, Tiana. You have no idea how much debt I had. The bills piled up. I didn't know how to get out of it. I was drowning." Michelle's voice broke, and I could hear the desperation in her words. "I thought the art was the only way to fix it. I thought if I sold it, if I made it look like it was all mine, I could get back on my feet. I wasn't thinking about you. I wasn't thinking about Dad." The room fell silent as I absorbed her words. A part of me wanted to believe her, wanted to understand her struggle. She had always been the strong one, the one who held everything together. But now, seeing her vulnerability, her crumbling composure, I realized how far she had gone to maintain that illusion. I took a deep breath, my heart heavy in my chest. "Michelle, this isn't just about money. It's about trust. It's about Dad's legacy. You destroyed that." "I didn't mean to," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I thought I could fix it. I thought I was doing the right thing. I was just trying to survive." I could feel my chest tightening as her words echoed in my mind. It wasn't just about the art. It was about the years of manipulation, the lies, and the secrets she had kept hidden. And now, sitting there, I realized that Michelle had betrayed more than just my trust. She had betrayed everything we had as a family. "I understand you've been under pressure," I said quietly, my voice trembling with emotion. "But you didn't have to lie to me. You didn't have to go this far. We were supposed to be in this together." Tears welled up in Michelle's eyes, but she wiped them away quickly, trying to hold it together. "I never wanted to hurt you, Tiana. I thought if I just kept it all under control, everything would be fine." "But it wasn't," I replied, the weight of the words sinking in. "Nothing is fine anymore." Michelle took a shaky breath and, for the first time in the mediation, looked me directly in the eyes. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Tiana. I know I've ruined everything. I should have trusted you. I should have come to you instead of doing this. Her apology didn't erase the damage, didn't take away the hurt that had settled deep in my heart. But I could see the sincerity in her eyes. This wasn't the perfect, polished Michelle I had known. This was the raw, vulnerable version of my sister, the one who had finally admitted what she had done. It was the first time I felt like she was being honest with me. The mediator shifted in his seat, sensing the shift in the room's dynamic. "It seems we're at an impasse here," he said, his voice neutral. "The evidence is clear. Michelle, you've admitted to forging the documents. The next step is for us to determine how to proceed from here." Stephen leaned forward, his voice calm but determined. "We will be pursuing legal action. Tiana is entitled to her rightful inheritance, and we will ensure that the art collection is returned to her. The forged will be invalidated, and Michelle will be held accountable for her actions." Michelle nodded, her face pale. She didn't argue. The weight of her actions was finally sinking in. She had crossed a line, and now there was no going back. "I understand," Michelle said quietly. "I'll do whatever it takes to make things right." But I couldn't help feeling that it was too late. The damage had been done, and while I could hear the remorse in her voice, the trust I once had in my sister had been shattered. I wasn't sure if it could ever be repaired. As the mediation concluded, the weight of the situation pressed down on me. I had won the legal battle, but I had lost something much more significant. The sister I had once trusted was now a stranger, and I wasn't sure if I could ever see her the same way again. Walking out of the room, I felt a strange mixture of relief and sorrow. The fight wasn't over, but I knew the hardest part was still ahead of me, healing from the betrayal and figuring out what family meant when trust had been so deeply broken. The days after the mediation blurred together. On the surface, I had won a crucial legal victory that would eventually bring the stolen art collection back to me, but it didn't feel like a win. Not really. The weight of what I had lost, the trust, the bond, the family I thought I could count on, pressed down on me more with each passing day. The first phone call came from Aunt Linda, one of my father's closest friends. Her voice was strained, laced with concern and disappointment. "Tiana, honey, we've all been talking, and we just think this whole thing has gone too far," she said, her words measured but sharp. "This isn't just about money, and you know it. You're breaking the family apart over something that could have been handled quietly. Your father would have wanted you to keep the peace." Her words struck me harder than I anticipated. My father, the man who had taught me to fight for what was right, the man who had left me with the belief that standing up for myself was always worth it, was now being invoked as a reason for me to back down. They weren't talking about the facts of the case. They weren't talking about the stolen art, the forged documents, the deceit. They were talking about peace, and peace meant silence. It meant forgiveness, even when betrayal had torn apart everything I thought I knew about my sister. "I'm not doing this for money, Aunt Linda," I responded, my voice tight with frustration. "This isn't about the paintings or the inheritance. This is about integrity. This is about honoring my father's memory." Michelle crossed a line, and I can't just let it slide. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "I understand, Tiana, but you have to understand that your actions are affecting everyone. You're dividing the family. You're making people choose sides." And that was the moment I realized how deep the divide had gone. It wasn't just Michelle I was up against now, it was the entire family. Everyone who had known us, watched us grow up, and believed in the image of us as the perfect family, was now questioning my actions. They saw me as the one who was stirring the pot, the one causing unnecessary chaos. They couldn't or didn't want to see the betrayal for what it was. All they saw was the disruption. The next few days brought more calls, each one more disheartening than the last. Michelle's friends, my parents' old colleagues, distant cousins, they all weighed in with similar sentiments. "You're being too harsh. You're tearing apart what your parents built. You should be the bigger person, Tiana." I felt as though I was suffocating in their opinions, drowning in their expectations. How could they not see that it wasn't just about family unity? How could they not see that Michelle had taken something irreplaceable, something our father had left us to share, and turned it into something she could own? It wasn't just about money. It was about trust. It was about betrayal. It was about honoring the values our parents had instilled in us. But no one was talking about that. And so, day after day, the phone calls continued. Each one was a reminder of how alone I was in this fight. It wasn't just the legal battle that was exhausting, it was the emotional toll of being pulled in every direction by family members who refused to see things my way. They weren't interested in the truth. They wanted harmony, peace, the family's reputation. They didn't care if Michelle had stolen from me. They just didn't want anyone to rock the boat. Then came the message from my mother's sister, Ellen. She was more direct, less sympathetic. "You know, you should really reconsider this whole lawsuit. You're making things so much harder for everyone. You're ruining Michelle's life, and for what? Just so you can get a few paintings back?" My hands shook as I read the message. It wasn't just that they didn't understand it, was that they thought I was being selfish, that I was the one making this harder than it needed to be, that I was the one causing the rift in the family, not Michelle. For the first time, I let myself cry. I had fought so hard to protect my father's legacy, and now I was being told that I was the one destroying it. My mind raced with conflicting thoughts. Had I really gone too far? Was I wrong for wanting justice? Was I letting my anger cloud my judgment? But deep down, I knew the answer. I wasn't the one who had gone too far. I wasn't the one who had forged a will. I wasn't the one who had stolen from my own sister. I wasn't the one who had betrayed everything we had as a family. But even as I thought that, the weight of my family's condemnation pressed on me harder than I could have ever imagined. It was like a heavy cloud, a constant reminder that this wasn't just about right or wrong, it was about family, and in their eyes, I had failed. As the weeks passed, I began to realize how isolated I had become. The few friends I had in the legal world started to distance themselves. They didn't want to get involved in a family dispute, especially one that was becoming so public. The professional networks I had worked so hard to build felt like they were slipping through my fingers, just like the family connections I had once taken for granted. The emotional toll was wearing me down. I didn't want to fight my sister. I didn't want to tear our family apart. I just wanted the truth to come out. I wanted Michelle to be held accountable for what she had done, and for the legacy of our father to remain intact. But the more I pressed on, the more I realized how much I had to sacrifice in the name of justice. I had lost more than just the art collection. I had lost my place in the family. I had lost the sister I thought I could trust. I had lost the support of everyone who should have had my back. By the time I walked into the lawyer's office for the next step in the process, I felt emotionally drained. Stephen, who had been nothing but supportive, could see the toll it had taken on me. "You don't have to keep fighting if it's too much, Tiana," he said gently, sitting across from me. "You've done everything you can, and sometimes stepping away is the hardest part of all." But I knew that stepping away wasn't an option. Not now, not when I had already come this far. The fight wasn't just for me anymore. It was for my father, for the truth, for the integrity of everything he had worked for. So I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and looked Stephen in the eye. "I'm not backing down," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "I'll finish this. I'll fight for what's right." And with that, I prepared myself for what was sure to be an even harder battle ahead. Because, in the end, it wasn't just about winning. It was about standing for what was just, no matter the personal cost. It was late on a Friday evening when my phone rang, the screen, displaying an unfamiliar number. At first, I thought about ignoring it, but something made me answer. The moment I picked up, I heard her voice, the voice that, for so long, had been the one I trusted most. "Tiana?" Michelle's voice was quiet, almost fragile. "It's Michelle." I froze, my grip tightening around the phone. I hadn't heard from her since the mediation, since the moment she admitted to everything, the forgery, the betrayal, the theft. Since the moment I had realized that the sister I had always known and loved had turned into someone I couldn't even recognize. "Michelle?" I repeated, my heart beating in my chest. "What do you want?" She paused for a long time, as though she were gathering the strength to say something she had been holding back for far too long. I just want to apologize," she said, her voice trembling. "I know I've hurt you, Tiana, and I don't even know if you'll listen to me, but I need to tell you everything." The words hung in the air like a heavy fog, and for a moment, I was too stunned to speak. The anger I had been carrying around for weeks, the resentment, the bitterness, it all swirled within me, making it hard to focus. I had spent so much time trying to understand how Michelle could do this to me, how she could betray everything we had as sisters, as a family. And now, here she was, on the other end of the phone, offering an apology one I hadn't expected and wasn't sure I could accept. "I'm listening," I said, my voice tight, guarded. Michelle took a deep breath before continuing. "I know I've caused so much damage. I know you probably hate me, and I don't blame you, but I need you to know why I did it. There was a long pause before she continued, her voice cracking. I've been drowning in debt for years, Tiana. Credit card bills, loans, gambling, it all spiraled out of control. I didn't know how to fix it. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine, pretending that I was the perfect sister, the one who always had her life together. I was scared, so scared. I clenched my jaw, trying to keep my emotions in check. Part of me wanted to yell at her, to remind her that none of this was an excuse, that the choices she made had consequences. But another part of me, the part that still cared about the sister I had lost, softened just a little. I let her continue. I thought if I could just sell the paintings, if I could make enough money, it would all go away. I thought it would be my way out, my escape from the mess I'd made, Michelle said, her voice barely above a whisper. I never thought it would get this far. I thought I could fix everything before you found out. But I was wrong. And now I'm just so sorry, Tiana. I've ruined everything. I've ruined us. Her words hung in the air, heavy with guilt and regret. I could hear the sincerity in her voice, the rawness that made it clear she wasn't just apologizing to ease her own conscience, she was truly sorry. But I wasn't sure that was enough. For the first time I realized that Michelle wasn't just apologizing for the art, for the stolen paintings. She was apologizing for the years of lies, the facade she had built around herself, and the deception that had consumed her. I could hear the weight of her own shame in every word. But no matter how sorry she was, it didn't change what she had done to me, to our family. It didn't take away the hurt, the sense of betrayal I'd carried with me since the day I found out she had forged my signature. I don't know if I can forgive you, Michelle, I said, the words feeling like daggers in my chest. You took something from me, not just the art, but trust. You broke the one thing we had left. I can't just forget that. I know, she replied quietly. I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I don't even know if I deserve your forgiveness. I just want you to know that I'm truly sorry. I never meant to hurt you. I never meant for things to get this bad. A knot formed in my stomach as I thought about everything we had lost, the trust, the connection, the family we used to be. And yet, here she was, admitting her mistakes, offering an apology I never thought I'd get. Part of me wanted to believe that Michelle was telling the truth, that she had learned her lesson. But another part of me knew that forgiveness wasn't so simple. Trust wasn't something that could be rebuilt with just a few words. I need time, Michelle, I said, my voice steady but strained. I can't just forgive you overnight. You've done more than just hurt me. You've betrayed everything we stood for, and I can't just pretend it didn't happen. I understand, she replied, her voice barely audible. I know it's going to take time. I just want you to know that I'll do whatever it takes to make it right. I'll take responsibility for what I've done. I'll fix this. I didn't know if she could ever fix this, or if we could ever go back to what we were. The truth was, I wasn't sure I could ever look at her the same way again. The sister I had once trusted, the one I had turned to for support and advice, was now a stranger to me. I didn't know if I could ever trust her again, not after everything she had done. You've made a lot of mistakes, Michelle, I said, the weight of my words settling in. And I can't just ignore them. I'm still going through this legal battle because I have to protect what was left to me. I can't let you get away with this, but that doesn't mean I hate you. I don't know what happens after all of this, but I need to find my way through it. There was a long silence, and I could feel the distance between us growing wider, a chasm that might never be crossed again. But in that moment, I realized that forgiveness wasn't something I had to offer immediately. It wasn't something Michelle could demand. It was something that would take time, something I had to work through in my own way. I know, Michelle finally whispered. I'll give you the time you need, and I'll keep trying to make things right, no matter how long it takes. As the call ended, I sat there for a long time, staring at my phone. Part of me felt relief that Michelle had finally admitted what she'd done, that she was sorry, that there was a sliver of hope for us. But another part of me, the part that still hurt from the betrayal, knew that this wasn't over, not by a long shot. Forgiveness was important, but justice came first, and that was a line I couldn't cross yet. The final days of the legal proceedings were grueling, filled with countless hours of negotiation, paperwork, and tense meetings with lawyers. It wasn't just the case itself that wore me down, it was everything that had come before. The emotional toll of watching my sister unravel, the fallout with family, and the bitter realization that trust, once broken, could never be easily repaired. But at last, the day came when Michelle was forced to return the proceeds from the art sales. It wasn't a victory, not in the traditional sense. Michelle had avoided criminal charges, thanks to a series of legal loopholes and the fact that the money had already been spent, but the damage to the family's reputation was irreversible. No amount of money could undo what had been lost, what Michelle had stolen. As I sat in the courtroom, staring at the papers that confirmed my rightful inheritance, I felt a strange emptiness wash over me. I had won, but it didn't feel like a victory. The art, once a symbol of my father's love and hard work, had become a painful reminder of everything that had gone wrong. My father's legacy, his hard work, his passion for empowering others, none of that could be restored by the mere act of reclaiming the paintings. With a heavy heart, I made the decision to sell the paintings. The money would go towards something that would honor my father's true vision: education, empowerment, and the pursuit of justice. It wasn't just about me anymore, it was about what my father had always wanted for me, for us. I used the funds to establish a legal fund for aspiring women in law. It was a way for me to ensure that my father's belief in education and the power of law wasn't lost, that the next generation of women could have the opportunities I had fought for. The women who would come after me would know that they didn't have to compromise their integrity to achieve their dreams. And in a way, that felt like the true inheritance, the real gift my father had given me. Starting a small law firm wasn't easy. The road was long, filled with obstacles and challenges that tested my resolve. But every step I took toward building my firm, every young woman I mentored, brought me closer to understanding the lessons my father had left behind. I knew I was doing what he would have wanted, not just fighting for myself, but helping others along the way. My relationship with Michelle, however, remained strained. We never fully healed. The bond we once had was irrevocably changed, and no amount of apologies or legal settlements could restore what had been broken. But I accepted that. Sometimes, the most painful lessons come at the highest cost. As I settled into my new life, running my firm and supporting the next generation of women in law, I found a sense of peace I hadn't expected. I had stood up for what was right. I had protected my father's legacy, even when it meant losing the one person I thought I could trust most. And while the pain of Michelle's betrayal would always linger, I could hold my head high knowing that I had done the right thing. In the end, the inheritance wasn't the art or the money, it was the lessons my father had left me. Integrity, perseverance, and the power of justice. Those were the things that mattered most. Those were the things that had allowed me to move forward. Looking back on everything, I realized that the real inheritance was never about what was left in a will or what could be sold for a profit. It was about the lessons that shape who we become, the values that guide us through the darkest moments. My journey wasn't just about reclaiming what was mine, it was about rediscovering who I was, what I stood for, and what I wanted to leave behind for others. Michelle's downfall served as a cautionary tale, a reminder that dishonesty, no matter how justified it seems in the moment, ultimately destroys everything it touches. But I didn't need to carry that weight forever. I chose to rise above it, to honor my father's memory in the best way I knew how, by empowering others, by sharing his belief in education, and by fighting for justice, no matter the cost. And now, as I continue my work, mentoring and helping women in law, I realize that my journey has only just begun. There is still so much to do, so many lives to touch, and so much more to fight for. The story of my inheritance is just one chapter in a much larger story, a story that's still unfolding. If you've read this far, I want you to take a moment and reflect on the lessons you've learned from my journey. And then ask yourself, what kind of legacy do you want to leave behind? If you believe in standing up for what's right, if you believe in the power of integrity and justice, then I need you to do one thing for me. Hit the subscribe button, share this story with someone who needs to hear it, and leave a comment letting me know what you've learned. This isn't just my story, it's a story that can inspire anyone to take action, to stand firm, and to never back down in the face of adversity. You might just be the one to make a difference in someone else's life. Let's keep this conversation going. Together we can create a community that believes in justice, that values integrity, and that supports each other in the pursuit of our dreams.